Good morning. Thank you. Appreciate Jeremy Hill and all the folks at Wichita State for putting on this conference. I'm a graduate of the University of Tulsa, and I'll be dating myself, but I will tell you that back in my day, there was some really good basketball played between TU and Wichita State. You might have also seen in my bio that I'm an accountant by training. I spent much of my career in finance and accounting, and I'm one of those accounting types whose left brain is far superior than her right brain. Not superior to others, just relative to my own. So when I looked for a creative way to start this presentation, I took my left brain to the internet and I started searching. Do you know that if you Google energy jokes, you can get 19 million results? And I can assure you that the bad jokes far outweigh the good ones. And surprisingly, there are energy jokes that are inappropriate for mixed company. But I'm going to share with you a few of my favorite jokes/puns. This is the best I could find. A man bought his first German electric car. He calls it his Volkswagen. What part of the jail do they keep energy criminals in? That would be fuel cells. Do not trust atoms. They make everything up. Where does a bad light end up? That would be a prism. And my personal favorite is from Dr. Sheldon Cooper on the Big Bang Theory. A neutron walks into a bar, asks the bartender, how much for a drink? The bartender says, for you, no charge. I think you now understand why I don't make my living off of my creative side. And I'm sure that you all know that energy, how we use it, how much it costs, how the use of it impacts the environment is not a joke. It's a serious matter that affects our personal lives, our economy, and our national security. Before we talk about energy, I'd like to take just a minute to introduce my company. Many of you in the room are probably customers of Kansas Gas Service, but you may not know much about our larger company, which is One Gas. We were created when a company called ONEOK spun out its natural gas distribution business into a completely separate, standalone, 100% regulated company. That happened back in on February 3rd of 2014. That was our first day of trading as a separate company. We trade under the ticker symbol OGS, and again, we're 100% regulated, which makes us a little bit unique in our industry. Most of the companies we call peers have at least some level of other operations, generally some other non-regulated earnings, so we're a little bit different. Although we're not quite 3 years old as a company, our history actually goes back more than 100 years. Here in Kansas, we started in 1909 when American Power and Light Company organized Kansas Gas and Electric Company, or KG&E, to provide natural gas and electricity in Wichita and Pittsburgh primarily. Then KG&E merged with Kansas Power and Light in 1992 to form Western Resources, and then ONEOK bought the natural gas distribution assets from Western Resources after that. So throughout the years, Kansas Gas has been known as Gas Service Company, Kansas Gas and Electric Company, KPL, and KPL Gas. In Oklahoma, our company dates back to 1906, prior to statehood even, when Oklahoma was referred to as Indian Territory. And at that time, the company incorporated as Oklahoma Natural Gas and began connecting gas from nearby wells and delivering it to customers. And then in Texas, our oldest system dates back to 1855 in Galveston, Texas, when natural gas was manufactured instead of being produced from wells, and it was used primarily for street and interior lighting purposes. And today we operate under the name of Texas Gas Service. In Kansas, we have about 19,000 miles of distribution and transmission pipelines, and we employ almost 1,000 people here in the state. As I said, we're regulated. We're regulated by the Kansas Corporation Commission. It includes 3 commissioners who are appointed by the governor to staggered 4-year terms. Our customers are located primarily in the eastern two-thirds of the state. We have the highest concentrations here in Wichita, in the Kansas City Overland Park area, and in Topeka. That's a bit about One Gas and Kansas Gas Service. Now let's turn our attention to natural gas on the national stage. Listen to these 2 quotes. First, I want to have an unpleasant talk with you about a problem unprecedented in our history. The oil and natural gas we rely on for 75% of our energy is running out. Our nation's independence of economic and political action is becoming increasingly constrained. And second, we have a supply of natural gas that will last America nearly 100 years. The development of natural gas will create jobs and power trucks and factories that are cleaner and cheaper, proving that we don't have to choose between our environment and our economy. Any guesses? The first statement was made by President Jimmy Carter in 1977 during his famous energy crisis speech. And the second was made by President Barack Obama in 2012 during his State of the Union address. That's a pretty dramatic difference of viewpoints in a mere 35-year time span. So what is it that happened to radically change the view of these presidents? And the answer is the shale gas revolution, which has had a dramatic impact on the natural gas industry. Yeah. So when many people hear the term shale gas revolution, they think hydraulic fracturing or fracking, which has actually been around commercially since the 1940s. But it's the combination of hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling that has really resulted in this revolution. So shale is a rock formation that doesn't give up oil and gas easily. But when you combine hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, we've been able to unlock vast quantities of oil and natural gas that weren't available before. So just think about that. A traditional well would be drilled down however many feet to a formation, a targeted formation, and let's say that's 100 feet thick. Well, that well could only produce the oil and gas from that targeted formation. Well, with horizontal drilling, we now take that well and we drill it up to a mile horizontally, and so all of the oil and gas in that formation can be produced. Dramatic impact on the efficiency, the cost of getting access to that oil and gas. As a result of these advances, the estimated future supply of natural gas has gone from about 1.2 trillion cubic feet in 1990 to just under 2,900 trillion cubic feet in 2014. That's a 140% increase, and it doesn't take into account all the natural gas that has been produced during that time period. Well, what does that mean? Let's put it in perspective. The US consumes roughly 27 trillion cubic feet of natural gas on an annual basis. 2,900 trillion cubic feet of gas reserves means that we have, as President Obama said, more than 100 years of supply. Pretty incredible. So I mentioned we can thank the shale gas revolution for this increased supply. This chart starts in 2009 with Texas being the state that had the highest level of production, followed by Alaska. And we also had a significant contribution from the Gulf of Mexico. If you fast forward to 2015, you see on the top yellow line on the chart, that's the gas that's produced from the other states. That includes the Marcellus and Utica shales in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and the Bakken shale in North Dakota. Those areas are now outproducing Texas. And we're also far less dependent on production from the Gulf of Mexico, which, as we know, can be significantly impacted by weather events. While the supply of natural gas is expected to increase, so is the usage, especially as we see coal getting replaced by natural gas to fire or to fuel electricity. And we're also seeing increases in exports of natural gas to Mexico and by tanker in the form of LNG. Based on current projections, though, the supply of natural gas is expected to be sufficiently robust to meet this increased demand. So if supply and demand are relatively balanced, what does that say for the price? Here's a forecast that was prepared in about 2012. At that time, the fundamentals suggested that over the next decade, the price of natural gas was likely to fall within an estimated price of $4 to $6.50 per million British thermal units, or MMBTUs in the business, a level well below the peak prices of the preceding decade. In the forecast that you see on the dotted lines on the chart, you see an absence of price spikes, whereas history would suggest otherwise. So let's take a look at those price spikes. The first spike occurred in the early 2000s, and it was caused by a dislocation in supply and demand. So the natural gas could not get to where the markets wanted it. That issue has been resolved by a significant amount of infrastructure investment, the building of pipelines over the past 10 years or so. The next spike occurred in 2005 in the Gulf of Mexico, and it was caused by Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. So we had significant direct disruption of that supply, which at the time was a very important part of the overall supply of natural gas to the US. So hurricanes, of course, are still a threat, but less so because we are less dependent on that production. The next spike came in the late 2000s, coming out of the financial crisis when oil rose to $100 a barrel. Historically, the price of natural gas has been correlated with the price of oil, but as the supply has increased, we've seen that correlation break down, or at least reduce. In a more recent analysis by Bloomberg, we see a rise in US prices, which is the blue line on the chart, in early 2014, and that's when spot prices reached about $6.50 per MMBTU during the polar vortex. Anybody remember that event? And then that was followed by a generally downward trend until March of this year, and now we're seeing prices gradually going back up. Going forward, Bloomberg expects a steady rise in natural gas prices in real terms, but with US prices remaining below $6 million per million BTU through 2040, and also lower than prices in Japan and Europe. That relative low price and the absence of price spikes is good news for the US consumers of natural gas. And who are those consumers? 66% of natural gas is consumed by direct use, those by customers who have residential, commercial, industrial applications for natural gas. And then the remaining 34% is consumed by the electric sector to generate electricity. And that number is going up all the time. The direct use of natural gas is the most efficient due to the fact that there's a significant loss in the conversion of one form of energy to another. So if you have 100 million BTU of natural gas, 92 million BTUs are delivered to customers. That's because natural gas requires no conversion, and there's only a small loss associated with transportation and distribution. For every 100 million BTU of source energy in the electric sector, 5% is lost in extraction, processing, and transportation, 64% is lost in generation, and another 6% is lost in distribution. So the end result is that only 32 BTUs of that 100 BTUs of source energy actually makes it to the home or the business in the form of electricity. Let me put that a different way. Assume you live in a remote part of the country and you use wood to heat your house. So you have to go to the forest, you have to chop the wood, you have to haul it back to your house, and you have to stack it up so that it's convenient, so that it's ready when you need it. So that's fairly reliable and relatively inexpensive. Now let's say you're approached by your cousin. It's somebody you trust. And she's come up with a new process to take wood and convert it into pellets. And you can use these pellets for heating. And they're far more convenient than wood. However, to convert the wood into pellets, wood is consumed through that process. So the wood that you give her, she will return you pellets that will heat your house for 3 days, but if you'd use the original wood, the raw material, you could heat your house for 9 days. That's the difference between the direct use of natural gas for home heating, for example, versus taking that natural gas, converting it to electricity, and then using that electricity for home heating. So here we see a graph of energy consumed by the US residential sector. Electric system losses account for half of the energy that's consumed by that sector. So increasing the direct use of natural gas to fuel appliances in our homes can really make a big difference in the loss of electricity and overall efficiency of our energy use. In addition to being efficient, I mentioned earlier that a shale gas revolution has brought stability to the price of natural gas, which is predicted to also remain fairly stable into the future. That's good news for residential customers who have seen other forms of energy increase in price. You can see here where the electric prices are represented by the purple lines and natural gas by the yellow. For one gas, our customers enjoy a 3-to-1 cost advantage over electricity. That's a meaningful difference, and it's a reason why our customers choose to have natural gas to power their furnaces, their cooktops, their heaters, and their clothes dryers. Those 4 appliances account for 50% of an average American home's energy consumption. So in our business, we know that our customers have a choice. They have to have electricity, but they choose whether they want to have natural gas. And so it's important to us that our product be safe and reliable and be more cost-effective than electricity, so they will continue to make that choice. And the numbers vary depending on what part of the country you live in, how many heating degree days are in your area, and the difference between price and electricity. But for most homes, the savings that you can get from using natural gas versus electricity for those major appliances is meaningful. That's a bit about the natural gas environment. Let's take a look at trends in energy consumption. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the U.S. population has grown from 295.5 million people in 2005 to an estimated 322.8 million people in 2015, which is an increase of almost 8%. All things being equal, that would suggest an increase in energy consumption. In addition, just think about the proliferation of electronic devices we've seen, and all of those require electricity. Take cell phones, smartphones, and tablets. Adult ownership of cell phones has increased 42% since 2004. Smartphone ownership has doubled since 2011. And tablet ownership has gone from negligible in 2010 to about 45% of adults having a tablet in 2015. And that's just the adults. Think about the kids. When's the last time you saw a high school kid running around without a cell phone or a smartphone? And the grade school kids increasingly are having them as well. All those devices require power. So those data points alone suggest an increase in energy consumption. But when you look at overall energy consumption, we actually see, it's the red line on the graph, we see that it's decreased. We've gone from about a little over 100 quads of energy in 2005 to 97.5 quads of energy in 2015, which is actually a decrease of about 2.9%. The decline in overall energy use is coming in spite of the increase of the population because we're seeing efficiency gains from across the sectors, including residential, industrial, commercial, and transportation. These gains have been due to more efficient home construction, higher energy efficiency appliances, programs like the EPA's Energy Star program, LEED building design, which is leadership in energy and environmental design, and voluntary standards that have been established by various industry organizations like the Association for Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. If you look at energy consumption by fuel source in 2005 compared to 2015, we see that coal has decreased 18% and natural gas has increased by 14%. And that's the shift in moving away from coal and to natural gas-fired generation for electricity. Everything else is relatively flat. While renewables have increased significantly on a percentage basis, they still make up just about 6% of the total energy pie, so they're a still relatively insignificant part. Nuclear has also stayed pretty flat, and it's predicted to remain relatively flat, with some retirements being offset by new construction. Yes, there actually are some nuclear plants being built in this country today. Nuclear has gotten a bad rap over the last few years, and in most markets, it's more expensive than natural gas or coal for generating electricity. However, while nuclear contributes about 20% of the fuel source for generating electricity, it accounts for 60% of the carbon-free emissions with respect to electricity. So it's really difficult to imagine how the U.S. is going to see meaningful reductions in CO2 emissions without nuclear being part of the puzzle. This graph puts natural gas consumption and CO2 emissions in a little better context. Natural gas consumption, which is represented by the blue bars on the chart, is up considerably, but total U.S. CO2 emissions are down from the peak in 2007. So there's several factors at play. I mentioned replacing coal with natural gas for electricity, but also we're seeing increased energy efficiency and conservation and the increase in renewables. Another look at emissions by fuel source, we've already talked about coal and natural gas. We also see emissions from petroleum declining. And that's a result of better fuel efficiency with respect to our gasoline and diesel vehicles. So all in all, emissions are going the right direction, which is down. Speaking of a reduction in carbon dioxide emissions, virtually the entire world is focused on climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In November, December of 2015, 196 countries gathered in Paris at the Conference of the Parties, which is called COP21, which resulted in the Paris Climate Agreement. And it was the culmination of 23 years of attempts by the United Nations to get collective action on emissions and global warming. The agreement seeks to prevent an increase in the global mean temperature of no more than 2 degrees Celsius, which is actually 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, although it does try for a more aggressive target of 1.5 degrees Celsius, and that's relative to pre-industrial levels. The agreement also requires countries to set their own national targets beginning in 2020. It mandates reporting. It allocates funding for small island countries most affected by rising water levels, and it creates a $100 billion fund to offset the cost of changing technology and climate damage to poor countries. The United States has signed and ratified the agreement, and just this week, the European Union ratified the agreement, which now sends it to the United Nations, who will decide how to monitor and enforce the deal. In the US, we also have the Clean Power Plan, which was announced by President Obama and the Environmental Protection Agency in August of 2015. The Clean Power Plan is intended to reduce carbon pollution from power plants, and under the plan, states were given options for developing state-specific plans to meet those goals and targets of the EPA. As you may know, in February of this year, the Supreme Court stayed implementation of the plan pending judicial review. Just a tremendous number of legal challenges and opposition to the Clean Power Plan. If you look at the two leading presidential candidates' platforms with respect to energy, they are really very different. Hillary Clinton is a supporter of COP21, of the Paris Climate Agreement, as well as the Clean Power Plan. Donald Trump is not. Hillary Clinton believes that global warming is real and that is a significant threat to our economy and our national security. And Donald Trump does not believe it's a significant threat. So with the outcome of the presidential election being uncertain and the future of the Clean Power Plan also being uncertain because of the legal challenges, the future of the United States' efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is pretty uncertain. That said, even in the absence of national limits on carbon dioxide carbon pollution from power plants, emissions are coming down as we've seen, and I expect that they will continue to do so. One Gas is committed to operating safely, reliably, and in an environmentally responsible manner. To that end, we have joined the EPA's Methane Challenge program as one of 41 founding partners. That program, we have committed to reduce our methane emissions from vintage pipe being defined as cast iron and bare steel pipelines. We're going to decrease that inventory pipeline by 2% per year across our three-state territory. We had about 1,500 miles of those pipelines at the beginning of the year, which means our target is about 30 miles per year of replacement. We also promote energy efficiency through rebate programs in Oklahoma, in Austin, Texas, and in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas that encourage customers to either switch from electric to natural gas appliances or to increase the efficiency of their natural gas appliances through these rebate programs. In Oklahoma, we have a fleet of CNG vehicles. It stands at about 669 vehicles, which is 34% of our fleet. The infrastructure for CNG in Oklahoma is very well developed. We have more CNG per capita in Oklahoma than any other state in the United States. We offer rebates in Oklahoma for CNG and biofuel vehicles and for home refueling appliances. And then here in Kansas, with funding provided by the Kansas City Clean Cities Coalition, we also offer rebates for CNG vehicles, $1,000 for either a dedicated or a biofuel vehicle. So while I'm on the subject of CNG, does anybody in the room drive a CNG car? Raise your hand. Oh, I see 0 hands. Which is really not surprising because the infrastructure in Kansas is not very well developed. However, it is improving. We serve 5 public stations here in Kansas. There's one in Kansas City, one in Overland Park, one in El Dorado, and 2 in Topeka. None, sadly, here in Wichita. We continue to see good economics for fleets. So the trash haulers and the buses and those types of fleets who can return and fuel in the evenings can still get a very good return even though the price of of gasoline and diesel has come down relative to the price of natural gas. Recently helped the Kansas City Public Schools convert a big portion of their fleet to natural gas vehicles. They've got about 47 vehicles in their fleet now that run on CNG. They have capacity for more, but sadly, they have no more funding at the moment. UPS is another CNG customer of One Gas. We're currently completing 2 projects for them here in the state, one in Salina and one in Kansas City. I think we can safely say that the energy picture has changed fairly dramatically over the past decade and will continue to change in the years to come. To meet the goals of COP21 and the Clean Power Plan, should it survive legal challenges or what comes after the power plan if it's defeated, the energy grid will have to be cleaner. But how far and how fast are we going to move? So let me leave you with a few predictions. Prediction number 1. The next 4 years under a new president will be, shall we say, interesting. I mentioned that the 2 candidates have vastly different views on energy policy. And of course, the wild card is either a candidate's ability to move her or his agenda forward, given the gridlock and the partisanship that we currently see in Washington. I don't think that bodes well for the future or the ability of Congress to pass a comprehensive, meaningful piece of energy legislation. Prediction number 2, the use of coal for power generation will continue to decline unless there are breakthroughs in technology around carbon capture. It's very difficult in today's environment to get permission to build a new coal power plant, even a clean coal power plant. So as a result, most of the new plants that are being built today are natural gas. Prediction number 3. Renewables will continue to make up a significantly larger percent of electric generation. We saw the video about Westar and their wind energy. So wind and solar are going to become an increasingly larger part of the electric supply. Again, the question is how quickly and at what cost is it going to take to add those and to get the grid to adapt the ability to accept that intermittent supply. Currently, the battery storage is not good, so there may be technology breakthroughs with respect to battery storage. Prediction number 4, nuclear will, I can't do it. I cannot make a prediction about nuclear. There's just way too many uncertainties. You've got the current forecast, again, that it's going to be relatively flat. So what's it going to take to build new nuclear? Well, first of all, it's very expensive. It's risky. It can take 10 years from taking a new nuclear plant from planning to startup. That's a long time, a whole lot of risk, and a whole lot of carrying charges during that period. There are questions about what the United States will do. Might the U.S. subsidize nuclear in order to get the clean emissions that come with nuclear? There's the question about where the public, the environmentalists, will accept nuclear as part of the solution, given the safety record and the disposal that's created. So lots of questions. Technology is another issue. Perhaps someone will figure out how we can make micro-nuclear plants that are less expensive and more agile to start up. So tremendous questions around nuclear. I was visiting with a gentleman from the Department of Energy at a conference recently, and he expressed the opinion that the United States is discounting nuclear. He thinks that we are going to have to find a way to rely more on nuclear because of its impact on emissions. And lastly, prediction number 5. Natural gas, I believe, is going to continue to play an important role in providing energy to residential, industrial, and commercial customers, as well as to the power generation sector. This country has a network of 2.5 million miles of pipelines that transport a quarter of the energy across this country that's consumed. When it comes to reliable fuel choices, natural gas is the cleanest after nuclear power. And unless we're all willing to turn off our lights and our air conditioners when the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, we're going to need natural gas as that intermittent, to balance that intermittent supply on the electric grid. So I didn't actually go out on a limb with any of those predictions. I'm certain, though, that the energy sector is going to change over the course of the next 20 and 25 years, with the long-term survivors being the cheapest, cleanest, and most reliable alternatives. I think natural gas is positioned well to be part of that future, and I think that bodes well for the state of Kansas, given that oil and natural gas is such a big part of the state's economy. So in closing, I've got several colleagues here from Kansas Gas Service. We'd like to thank you for your business, for those of you who are our customers. We appreciate your business, and we want you to know that every day our focus is on providing you safe, reliable, and efficient service. So thank you.